bien. Maybe some of you have met me already. Maybe not with this image, but sometimes you have to look smart. So welcome to this session of LACNIC TV. They will be working today and would like to join me today. This is what we call learning from those who know already, or stories from the internet that you did not know previously. So we will be speaking about this topic today. So in principle, we will have with us, we will be focusing on the review process of the document that is being prepared regarding governance of the Internet regional registries. Maybe some of you are already familiar with this, but I will try and explain this a bit further. The main players of this process are the Addressing Council. This is ASO, the Addressing Support Organization. This is composed by the persons you see here on the screen. 3 persons represent each of the 5 regions in which the world of regional registries is divided into. As you are aware, regional Internet registries are non-profit organizations that provide number resources and IPv4 and IPv6 addresses and autonomous systems for the organizations that are based in your jurisdictions. If you can work up the mass, there are 5 regional registries, but we only have 12 individuals in the picture. This is because this is one of the regional registries, namely AFRINIC, which is the one that operates in the African region, that is currently embarked on the restructuring process of its organization. And until the month of June, it is likely that they won't be able to start with their elections in order to appoint the persons from their community who will be joining this group. So at present, the chair of the ASO this year is Greg Lemon from RIPE NCC, and the vice chairs are Esteban Lescano from LACNIC and Nick Nugent from ARIN. They are the vice chairs. And from the LACNIC region, we have Ricardo Patara, Esteban Lescano, and myself. So we represent the LACNIC region. So this council that also has a role that involves as an advisory entity to ICANN in 2025, in addition to supervising the topics regarding global policies, are also working on the election of position number 10 of ICANN's board. This is a process that has almost finished, and in the coming days we'll have the results. And they are working in the update process of a document that is called ICP2. Now, who knows what ICP2 is? Has anyone heard of ICP2? Why, quite a few. Almost nobody knows what ICP2 is. So you see, there are stories of the internet that you haven't heard of. Well, when I heard about this panel, I said, I'm going to see if I have information. So this is what I found in the internet. I found this video. Let's see if we can have it on the screen. Can we watch one of the videos I had? Don't we have the video? You know, this is like on TV. We don't have the video, or do we?
改定案というものを、作っているところです。こういった作業というものは、ASO の中で作業が進んでいきますけども、もちろん重要なのは、RIR にとって重要なのは、コミュニティの皆さんの声を伺うことです。メーリングリストが準備されます。こちらの方に、参加していただいて、我々。
Bueno, yo encontré esto que estaba muy bueno.
I found that which was quite cool. Our friend was explaining all the things we want to know about this, Akinori Maemura. But he was explaining this in Japanese, and here in Brazil, some do speak Japanese, but my Japanese is not that good. So I don't know what about yours. So because this was a bit difficult to change, didn't know how to translate this. We had to find AI to do so. But because we're now in Sao Paulo, we decided to go to Campinas, which is very near here, and we brought one of the persons who is familiar with this topic and who will be with us today. And this is Ricardo Patara, whom I would like to invite to come up. And we also went to Buenos Aires and we brought Esteban Lescano. Esteban Lescano will also be helping us out. So let us give them a big round of applause. Because we are in Brazil, Ricardo will be speaking in Portuguese. So if you need interpretation, you can pick up your headsets. Esteban will be speaking in Spanish. So now let us very rapidly see what we can ask them, because they are the guys who know. So let us see. So we already know what ASO is, at least we have an idea of what it is, and we also spoke about something that is ICP2. So let's see. What is ICP2 and why is it time to update it? Ricardo, let us know. So good morning. Thank you, Jorge. So how can we view ICP2? This is not a very well-known document. It's not part of our daily activities. This is a document that we don't use very frequently, but that doesn't mean it isn't important. Quite the opposite. It is very important. So basically, it establishes criteria for establishing RIRs. It was used twice in the past, but this is an old document. It was written in the year 2001, in June 2001, so more than 20 years ago, almost 25 years ago. So the scenario today is quite different from what we had at that time. So this had to do with how the internet was used, and also particularly regarding the relations and internet governance models. Today, internet is quite different. The relation between the different organizations involved in the process are also quite different. The governance models are now more mature compared to those times, and there are new challenges today. We see some examples, and that is why there is a need to review this document. We need to incorporate updates in order to strengthen this document, but most of all because this is a governance model, in this case, that has to do with the numbering resources and the internet globally. So a question for Esteban now. In October 2023, what happened at that time? Who asked ASO to work on this, and what was that moment like? Could you please tell us more about this? Thank you, Jorge.
Yes, yes, they asked the address council to work, trying to reinforce this argument that rules the recognition of IRRs. So ever since, we had many meetings, both in person and conference calls and travels. and it was all ASO was focused on that. So the first thing that we tried to do was to start working on principles. What are the principles that are reflected in the current document, but that might require further development, and also principles that were implicit that required being explicited. So after hard work, we managed to put together a principles document. So we submitted it to public consultation, both at our community, at the IRR, and the global community within a platform. So, and it was very interesting because it's a way we could start with a point that I consider to be essential, that is focusing on principles, so that later on in the process be able to develop a complete, a full document. Very good. Thank you. There you mentioned something about a consultation. Well, this consultation actually was late last year. So the questionnaire on the principles that you mentioned, what was it all about and what happened? What was the feedback you received? Could you tell us, Ricardo? Yes, an interesting aspect. From the beginning, when we reviewed this document, asking the consultations to the community was something very relevant always. So we started with the consultations head on. Instead of presenting a draft document, but already in the process of developing it, we asked the community from the very start what things they considered that should be included based on ICP2 and the new challenges too. So we asked about the principles within the regional IRRs, including ICON. That happened concurrently. We had 298 replies. All of them were considered of good quality. Some were pretty much alike and were repeated, but all the aspects were considered. And those comments with regard to the principles are reflected in the document that we are about to discuss. The community mentioned the mechanisms to strengthen the engagement of the community, and that is reflected in this new document. The role played by the internet registries, also in the recognition and in a process that might occur, that is cancelling the recognition of a certain regional registry, and the comments to include some appeal processes. We have received these comments by the community and we have incorporated that into the document. So that is how we reached a draft version of what could potentially be a new document, and that is what we're going to discuss from now on. Now, since we are talking about this document about the ordinance of the IRRs, well, yes, in general terms, it's a document that seeks to set the principles that or the requirements that need to be met if new IRRs want to be recognized, as well as the obligations or the commitments that they must abide by as long as they live and provide services to community. They also establish the criteria for reviewing the document, as well as we saw the approval procedure. And something that is important to point out is that, and we're going to tell you the current status of this document, but it's interesting that it's a document that is even, its title is being debated. Governance of IRRs, somebody mentioned criteria, others would speak of frameworks. So it's a document that is in process, but the focus is that being able to establish criteria for recognition and commitments that the IRRs must respect all along their lifetime, as while they provide services to the resource holders. So the document also includes some comments about the roles and responsibilities, and they also update some requirements for recognition. What does this mean, Ricardo? Well, yes, an important aspect is because it's part of the principles and was incorporated in the document, and it has to do with stating clearly who the actors involved are and the actions. For instance, the ICANN, IRRs, and this document clearly states the roles that each of these organizations will have throughout this process. This document or this draft actually encompasses the process through which an IRR is recognized, its operations, and also more extreme cases, revoking that recognition that had been previously awarded. Of course, there are also mechanisms that can prevent that from happening. And all this is included in this document, clearly stating the roles of each of the actors involved. And as I also mentioned, the potential revokement of this recognition. It also very clearly states the participation and the role of IRRs and the communities in the process, in addition to the possibility of supporting or not supporting the recognition of a new IRR based on the criteria described in the document. And the document explains the criteria that an IRR must meet to become such a, and if they wanted to distribute internet resources, and it's clearly defines the potential scenarios and the roles of IRRs: approval, rejection, when to do one thing, when not to do it, the appeal processes, to what extent is ICANN involved in these processes too, and other criteria that are there, that were there and continue to be there in this proposal or the draft, have to do with the catchment area or the coverage and the area of service. But there's something that is new that has to do with the governance of the organization, for it to remain stable, for it to always to collaborate with other existing organizations, and to also to ensure a good governance of internet resources globally, the support of the community, and the relevance of communities' support for the creation of new IRRs, and the support that has to do with showing intent, and but also the will of supporting financially, so that the IRR may be self-sufficient in the future as they start working as a regional registry in the region. Yes, so yes, we have to be careful with this. I'm going to show you something else, and what happens with the continuous processes and the revoking and the criteria for rejecting or approving. Yes, in a way, that is the focus, the core of the document, and it has to do with this. That is not in the original document. It does not expressly establish the commitments that must be maintained during the operations of the IRRs. So this document seeks to make those commitments implicit. From 10 initial commitments, now there are 16, and they're well defined. They have to do, for instance, it needs to be a non-profit organization. It needs to be an independent, an economically independent organization. They need to be impartial in the way they administer resources. They need to have a PDP for policy development. It has to be transparent, open to the community, and they need to keep records of that. And it also states that no members can capture the IRR, that is, participation in when appointing the board. It needs to engage the members. So you can't allow one single member to control the board. These are all criteria that are all aimed at ensuring governance. And if these requirements are not met, then there's a procedure for revoking that recognition of the IRR. So it establishes what the procedures are and who intervenes, and it also speaks of the possibility of adopting redressing actions, so as not to have to reach the point where you revoke the recognition, because that is like the last resource. And whenever that recognition is revoked, there must be a process for shifting, either with an interim authority, but always trying to ensure the continuity of services to the resource holders. And Jorge, you asked me about the review. We are going to evaluate the need for reviewing it every 10 years. Now, of course, that doesn't mean that you shouldn't do it before, but the IRRs, together with ICANN, every 10 years will review the need to update it or not. And something very important, the document states that any approval needs to be unanimously accepted by the IRRs, because it's a document that is binding for IRRs. It regulates the entire operation. So if you change something, that needs to be accepted by the IRRs. Very good. Thank you, Esteban. I think that you described it wonderfully and very quickly, because, well, time flies. Ricardo, we already saw all the document and the context. Tell us where we stand today and why we are talking about this at LACNIC 43. Well, that is a very good question. We are in that consultation period precisely. So we had a consultation last year about the principles based on comments and on the feedbacks that we received. We drafted a document that could be the new version of that document of IRR governance, and now we need a period of consultation about that document. It started on the 14th, May 14th, and it will be open until May 27th. That's happening in all the regions, not just here at LACNIC, but at the other IRRs and at ICANN. They also have their own community and consultation processes. So the community, so to speak, have been consulted. And so the idea is, to remind some new things that have to be presented, and we need to invite the community to participate. So as I said, the document has already received comments, because the community's comments are very important, so that this document will be well used. So at present we are in the process of consulting, and it will be closed on May 27th. Good. So finally, how can people join the consultation? What do they have to do? Well, we have a specific email list. You can subscribe. It's open. It remains open all throughout the consultation. The document can be downloaded from the website of LACNIC. There's a section in the site that says consultation of ICP2, and you can download the document both in Spanish and in Portuguese. Here we present a QR, and if you can't wait, you can download it now. And I think that an important thing is that it's a global consultation. So as we consulted in this region, each region is going through their own process. And just as we have this session today at LACNIC 43, ARIN had their event last week, and RIPE and APNIC had webinars to explain things to the community, just as we are doing now. In the case of AFRINIC, it's important to mention that they'll have a webinar tomorrow, and they have this list of consultations open. So it is very important to participate, and as recommendations to participate, what we seek as ASOAC is to discuss the contents of the document. It's not that we want you to manifest on implementation issues. Those issues are beyond the scope of the consultation. It is rather focused on contents. What we are debating, is it clear? Does it need clarification, further development? And as I said at the beginning, even the title of the document is subject to consultations. So we invite you to participate. I think that it's a very important document for the institutional life of each IRR, for the global number system, and for that coordination. So it is very important for the community to participate.
Thank you very much, Esteban. So now we are in this consultation process. Well, this consultation will close on May the 27th, and from June 9 to 12, the ASOEC will be working on the review of all the feedback received during this consultation period in the month of September. They will now have to publish the updated document based on the comments submitted during this consultation process. And in the fourth quarter, the final version will be ready. And of course, this has to go through the approval process and adoption process of the NRO and of ICANN until this is finally a document. Because we have a couple of minutes left, very rapidly, I'd like to go over to the commercials. So, commercials are over. We're now going to have a special session right now, because you will open the floor. You can ask your questions. You can make your comments. Okay, good. That's good. Fine. But this is a Q&A session. But let's see. As I was saying, you will be able to ask questions to the panelists or comments on this topic, but only the comments and the answers. You're given 90 seconds to make your questions and to get the answers. These are very brief questions and answers. So where shall we start? Ariel Grazer. Please state your name. We can't hear you. Okay, now it's working. Yes. Good morning. I'm Ariel Greiser from Cabase. The consultation process that we're in the midst of right now is quite clear. But how does the update of this document of ICP2 following the consultation process, and how does this process finish? Thank you, Ariel. That's a good question. And this is a process that has a timeline that was designed by ASOAC. in consultation with the NRO-AC. So that it is expected that once the consultation period is over, on May the 27th, the SOAC has to process all the feedback received during the consultation process, those received at ICANN and also those received in the region. Then a second version of the document is prepared. We're going to meet in Prague with that aim. That second version will then be forwarded to the NRO for its approval. In the event of this being approved by the NRO, it is then raised to ICANN, as Jorge explained. So based on ICANN's decision-making processes, this will then be approved. It is expected that by the end of the year, this document will be ready. But there might be a further review every 10 years. And the option is of reviewing or not if it is necessary. So every 10 years, this process will be repeated. At every 10 years, for sure, ICANN and the RIRs will assess the need to review it. It doesn't mean that this will be necessary or if there is an obligation to review it every 10 years. Thomas was also waiting in the queue. Thomas, can you hear me? I saw that there was a very limited show of hands when he asked who knows ICP2. What is the participation like in other regions? What are the topics you discuss? This is very important for us. Ricardo? As we heard, each region has its own processes. This is already taking place, this consultation process already taking place since, and will finish on May, since the 14th of April. So the comments are submitted through the discussion list. Others use lists that already exist. So not so many comments were submitted initially, but we do already have comments received from the RIPE region that highlight major items that are also being considered. It is likely that all these comments and suggestions will be considered by the group. It is important to clarify that in the case of our region, we have the mailing list. This mailing list has the SOAC has sent mails, so I'd like to take the opportunity that Tomas has mentioned this. We encourage you to participate to see whether in the remaining time we have until closing this consultation period, we can provide more comments on this list. Jordi, I think, was waiting in the queue. Yes, Jordi. I'm Jordi Palette. I'd like to take the opportunity to refer to what Ariel was saying, and I hadn't thought about that. I understand that there won't be a process that is similar to consensus. I don't think consensus will be reached through the different RIRs. It might occur that you prepare a document that is not affected by the community globally, but that was not my question. That was just a comment that I came up with. Now, the major issue I have with the document in the current situation is that unanimous acknowledgement is required from the RIR, and I think that is incorrect. There is a lot of work to be done there. And on the other hand, I am also wondering about the handoff. If an RIR is disrecognized or unrecognized, I think it won't be an issue with the handoff. This should be studied carefully and in detail because we might come across a problem. But this is a sensitive issue. Thank you, Jordi, for your comments. I also invite you to state this in the list so we have that comment there. Someone else? Douglas? So we have been hearing about this for quite some time. This is not new. Now, why? What is the cause for not continuing with the global policies? What happened there? Oh, what was missing rather? Or, I don't know, what will happen there? Ricardo? As I mentioned already, we had a scenario in the internet that was quite different. At the time this document was prepared, there were two projects in process to recognize the potential of internet registry, in the case LACNIC and AFRINIC. So this document did not exist. In the time we didn't have a recognition process. This document was prepared by the players of the reels that already existed together with ICANN. This did play a role. Internet changed over time, and the relations between the different organizations also changed. Some problems could have been avoided had we reviewed this document previously, because all the systems were different at that time, and there was no clear review process considered, and even of this document. We have time for two more questions. Edmundo and also Maria, that I think has a remote question. Edmundo. Good morning. Edmundo Casares from Mexico. With the changes that are being added to this document, I came up with the thought that if these changes reflect what is happening in the registries, or is this a document that will be asking the registries to adapt to what will be stated in the document once it has been approved? I don't know what the current status is of the registries, or in the best of cases, they are just registering what the registries are right now, or whether the document will include changes that the registries will have to carry out once this document has been approved. Thank you, Edmundo. That's a good question. What we are doing now is updating a document that already exists. So once the registries have been recognized, for example, LACNIC and AFRINIC, which are the ones that were created following the approval of ICP2, initially they met those requirements. So it's not that there are new requirements now, but these are the requirements that already existed and now evolved, and these have to be applied throughout the lifespan of the registry. Now, it is important to highlight, and this is stated in the document, is that the registries have to adapt their procedures to what is established in this document. There is a criterion of supremacy. The document is there to provide a framework. It is something that is mandatory for registries. So if a registry is not complying with the provisions of the document, it has to adapt its practices to the provisions of the document. But this is not something that is essentially new. It's what already existed. This is now clarified and is spelled out. This is in order to strengthen the RIR system and to provide greater accountability of that registry vis-à-vis its communities. And Edmundo, in this regard, the document updates best practices that have occurred over the past 20 years. It's not that you are starting from scratch. It is rather the experience that is documented to a certain extent. So these are the changes, so maybe this will not be so dramatic.
Maria, are you there for a remote question? Could you open her mic? Hello? Yes, there's a question by Neida Diaz. And she says, considering that every 10 years there will be a review, and being aware that today the digital world and new technologies are speeding, shouldn't it be more often? Well, we can always revisit that interval. This is a document that we reached consensus by the IRRs as to the need to do that, and I said that it was as the ASOAC that wanted it updated. So if for any reason the document needs to be updated, well, then the NRO could point that out. Now, we from ASO wanted to say that at least it should be updated every 10 years. And every 10 years, people should say whether it needs to be revisited or not. It's at least. So in this case, the document was developed in 2001, and now we are in 2025. Imagine, 24 years. So based on that, we decided that every 10 years we need to say whether it needs an update or not. But it goes without saying that if for some reason that happens before, then it will be revised before. Well, so here this morning we had a session where at least I learned a lot with our speakers, and I said that I always ensure the quality of my speakers. So with this we close, we run out of time, and I hope to see you again, but I invite you to join the list of this process. It's open. So the questions have been very good, the answers have been very good, and Wesley, your comments too. I think that this material will be added as documentation, but the list must have a richer life beyond this event. So everybody here today, if you're interested, if you are following this remotely too. So a round of applause for our panelists. And if you have any more questions or doubts, you can invite us for lunch. Or you can invite them for lunch, and I'm sure that they will be very happy to accept and discuss it with you. See you.